A week had passed since returning from Karelia. Streltsov was given leave for recovery, a standard procedure after difficult missions. He spent 7 days in his Moscow apartment, trying to forget the greenish glow of Karelian forests, the voices calling him by name, and Major Sokolov's gaze moments before the supernatural consumed him. But forgetting proved impossible. At night he was plagued by nightmares. The metallic object with pulsating symbols, figures of the missing platoon moving in a slowed, eerie dance among the trees. And Marak was always in these dreams, a dark silhouette with amber eyes, watching Igor from a distance but never approaching, never answering his call. Afraid. The medallion on Streltsov's chest remained cold, like a piece of ice. Marak inside had gone quiet, showing no signs of life. This silence was more disturbing than all his previous demands for payment. On the 7th day, unable to bear it any longer, Igor called Vera. "Marak is still silent," he said when she answered. "This is abnormal." "I know," her voice sounded tired. "Zarya has gone quiet, too. She's frightened." "What does that mean?" "Not over the phone," she answered softly. "Let's meet at 7 at our place." Our place, the Cosmos Cafe at VDH, crowded enough not to attract attention, but with convenient corner tables where one could talk without fear of being overheard. When Streltsov arrived, Vera was already waiting at a table by the window. In front of her stood a cup of cold tea, and in her hands she was twisting her medallion, unusual since Department 13 employees tried not to draw attention to this object. "Hi," said Igor, sitting down across from her. "You look tired." "Haven't slept for 3 days," she smiled weakly. "Every time I close my eyes, I see—" "I know," he nodded. "Same here." They sat in silence. A waitress brought coffee for Streltsov and fresh tea for Vera. "Is Marak still silent?" she asked when the waitress had gone. "Yeah, I don't even feel his presence in the medallion, as if he left." "He hasn't left," Vera shook her head. "He's hiding, deep inside. Like Zarya, they've, how to put it, gone into hibernation." "From fear?" "From realization." She sipped her tea. "You see, what we encountered in Karelia is something beyond their comprehension, something more ancient, more powerful than they themselves, something from the place where even they came from." "From the abyss?" "Deeper," Vera said quietly, "from beyond the outer darkness. From the place where the very laws of the universe were born, a place of absolute chaos." Streltsov felt a chill run down his spine. Department 13's training materials occasionally mentioned the outer darkness, a hypothetical dimension preceding all known worlds, a place inhabited by beings for whom even the concepts of life or death have no meaning. "And how do we fight this?" he asked, "if even our supernatural companions are frightened?" "I don't know." Vera gazed out the window at evening Moscow. "Derzhavin summoned me yesterday, talked about an ancient ritual that allows sealing breaches between worlds. But the price, a whole soul," Streltsov finished for her. "You mentioned it before. Whose soul, Vera?" "The one who performs the ritual," she turned to him. "A human soul given voluntarily and completely can seal one breach. 7 breaches, 7 souls." "7 deaths," Igor clarified grimly. "And who does he plan to sacrifice? Us?" "He didn't specify. Said it must be a voluntary choice, and that candidates have time to think." "Candidates," Streltsov chuckled. "Sounds like a death sentence." "Isn't it?" Vera leaned closer. "We signed up for service knowing the risks, and if the price of saving the world is a few lives—" "Then what?" Igor interrupted her. "Are you ready to become one of those sacrifices?" "Yes," she answered simply, and he understood she wasn't lying. "If necessary. What about you?" Streltsov pondered. Was he ready to give his life for humanity? A few months ago, he probably would have hesitated, but now, after everything he'd seen, after realizing the scale of the threat, "Perhaps," he finally said, "but I want to know more. What's this ritual? How does it work? And most importantly, are there other ways?" "That's exactly what the analytical department is working on now," Vera finished her tea. They're searching the archives for any information about the convergence of spheres, about ways to counter it. But so far, the self-sacrifice ritual is the only thing we have. They fell silent. Around them, normal cafe life bustled. People came and went, laughed, talked, unaware of the approaching threat, unaware that in 3 months their world might cease to exist. There's something else, Vera lowered her voice. I found more information about your grandfather. About Vasily Petrovich? Streltsov leaned forward. What exactly? Some records have survived in the department archives. He was indeed an operative like us, from 1920 to 1938. Then, she hesitated. Then the records end. No official discharge, no transfer, nothing. He simply disappeared from the documentation. Strange, Igor frowned. According to family legend, he worked at a factory in Leningrad and died during the blockade. That's a cover. Vera shook her head. Standard procedure for those times. A legend about an ordinary life and death was created. But what really happened? I need to find out, Streltsov said decisively. It could be connected to the current situation. If he also encountered phenomena similar to what we saw in Karelia, I'll continue searching, she nodded. But we need to be careful. Derzhavin doesn't approve of independent initiatives. To hell with Derzhavin, Igor lowered his voice. He's hiding a lot from us. I'm sure he knows more about the convergence of spheres than he's telling, and about the self-sacrifice ritual, too. Probably, she agreed. But he's our commander, and so far the only one who has a plan to counter the threat. Streltsov leaned back in his chair, thoughtfully gazing out the window. Outside, snow was beginning to fall. Large flakes whirled in the light of street lamps, covering the city with a white blanket. Ordinary winter Moscow. So vulnerable to what was approaching from beyond the boundary. What do we do next? He asked. Wait until Derzhavin assigns us to the suicide squad? No, Vera took an envelope from her bag and handed it to him. Tomorrow at 10 there's a briefing, new mission. Streltsov opened the envelope. Inside was a sheet marked Top Secret with a brief mission description. Murmansk? He looked up at Vera. Another breakthrough point? Uh-huh, she nodded. The second of 7, Polar Station North 16. Officially, a meteorological base. In reality, a secret facility for studying anomalous phenomena in the Arctic. 3 days ago, communication with it was lost. The last message, they came from under the ice. And they're sending us there? After Karelia? That's precisely why they're sending us. Vera looked at him seriously. We've already seen the harbingers. We know what we're dealing with. And, she hesitated. And we're already on the list of potential sacrifices, Streltsov finished for her. If the ritual needs to be performed. Yes, she didn't avert her gaze. But that's not all. There's another reason why they chose us. Specifically, you. What's that? Your grandfather. Vera lowered her voice. He was at North 16 in 1938 before his disappearance from the records, conducting some special operation. Derzhavin thinks there might be a connection. Streltsov felt everything tighten inside him. Too many coincidences. His grandfather, saved by them in the past, becoming a Department 13 operative, and now this mystical connection to current events. I knew there was something off about my grandfather, he said quietly. I always felt it. His stories about the war, about the blockade, there were always oddities, inconsistencies. Now I understand why. Maybe we'll find answers at the station. Vera stood up, putting on her coat. Prepare for departure. Train to Murmansk leaves tomorrow evening. Train? Why not a plane? Weather conditions, she shrugged. Heavy snowfall, wind. The airport's closed for 3 days. They left the cafe and stepped onto the snowy square. Vera stopped, turning to Streltsov. Igor, she said seriously, however this story ends, I want you to know, I'm glad I worked with you, that we were together. She touched his hand, a brief but warm contact. Then she turned and quickly walked toward the metro, not looking back. Streltsov watched her go, feeling a strange heaviness in his heart. as if this farewell was something more than it seemed. He automatically touched the medallion on his chest. It remained cold, lifeless. Mrak inside was silent, and this silence frightened him most of all. At night, Streltsov had another nightmare. He stood in the middle of an endless snowy plain. There was nothing around, no trees, no buildings, only white silence stretching to the horizon, and above him a strange greenish sky, shimmering like the northern lights. Suddenly, the snow beneath his feet began to crack. Thin lines spread in all directions, forming a complex pattern similar to the symbols they had seen on the metallic object in Karelia. And then the ice cracked completely, and something emerged from the fissure. Not human, not animal, a creature defying description. A massive body covered in scales, multiple eyes burning with green light, and tentacles writhing like living snakes. The creature turned its eyeless head towards Streltsov and spoke, not through a mouth, but directly into his consciousness. "We are returning, we are coming, and nothing will stop us." Igor wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. Wanted to scream, but his voice was gone. The creature slowly approached, its tentacles reaching towards Streltsov. "Your soul already belongs to us. You are one of us, always have been." It touched his chest, and suddenly the medallion became white-hot. Mrak inside screamed, not with a voice, but with pure pain that pierced Igor's consciousness. At that moment, Streltsov woke up, gasping for air. The apartment was dark and cold, despite the working heating. He turned on the light and saw that the medallion on his chest was glowing with a faint reddish light, for the first time since returning from Karelia. "Mrak?" Streltsov called quietly. "Are you there?" "Master." The voice inside was faint, like a whisper. "They are coming. They are already close. The convergence is near." "Who are they? What is the convergence?" "Those feared even by beings like me." Mrak spoke with difficulty, as if each word caused him pain. "The ancients, creators, destroyers. They created worlds and can destroy them." "How do we stop them? Cannot stop, can only delay." Mrak fell silent, then added, "The price is high, too high." "The self-sacrifice ritual, yes, but there is another way." Mrak's voice became very quiet. "A path in your blood, in your grandfather's legacy." "What do you know about my grandfather?" Streltsov tensed. "He was stronger. He found a way in the icy depths where sky meets earth." "North 16? The polar station." But Mrak no longer answered. The medallion's glow faded, and it once again became a cold, lifeless piece of metal. Streltsov sat on the bed, head in his hands. What did his grandfather know? What method had he found to counter the ancients? And why did Mrak speak of a path in his blood? Too many questions, and too little time to find the answers. In the morning, a briefing was held at Department 13. Derzhavin personally conducted it, indicating the mission's special importance. Besides Streltsov and Vera, 4 other operatives were present, all carriers, all with fragmented souls. "Polar Station North 16, the colonel began, pointing to a map of the Arctic. "Located on Novaya Zemlya archipelago, in its northernmost part. Officially, a meteorological and research base. In reality, an observation point for an anomalous zone that has existed there since 1908. "Since the Tunguska meteorite fall," one of the operatives clarified. "Exactly," Derzhavin nodded. "What fell in the Siberian taiga was not a meteorite, nor a comet, as scientists believe. It was an artifact of extraterrestrial origin, a portal, if you will, the ancients' first attempt to break into our world." "First?" Streltsov asked. "There were others?" "Yes. In 1938, in the same region, a second breakthrough attempt occurred. We managed to stop the invasion then, but—" He fell silent, looking at Igor. "At the cost of many lives." "Was my grandfather there?" Streltsov asked directly. "Yes." The colonel didn't deny it. "Vasily Petrovich Streltsov led the operation to contain the breakthrough. He managed to close the portal, but he didn't return, nor did his entire group. But according to the official version, he died during the blockade." "A cover story," Derzhavin shrugged. "Standard procedure. Families weren't told the truth. Too dangerous, too incredible. Streltsov clenched his fists under the table. Another lie. Another secret. "And what's happening now?" asked Vera, bringing the conversation back to the current mission. 3 days ago, an alarm signal came from the station, Derzhavin continued. They came from under the ice. Then communication was lost. Satellite images show strange activity in the region, unusual illumination, similar to what you observed in Karelia. "Another breakthrough point," Vera said quietly. "Yes," the colonel confirmed, "and probably one of the most active. Your task is to reach the station, assess the situation, and if possible, rescue the personnel. But most importantly, determine the nature and scale of the breakthrough. We need to know what we're dealing with." "And if we need to apply the special protocol?" asked one of the operatives. "Act according to the situation." Derzhavin looked at each of them. "You've all been briefed on the self-sacrifice ritual. You all know the price. But remember, this is a last resort. Use it only if there are no other options." Streltsov caught Vera's gaze. They both understood that the colonel was essentially sending them to their deaths. One of them might not return from this mission. "Questions?" Derzhavin surveyed the group. "How many people are at the station?" asked Streltsov. 12. 4 of them are operatives. The rest, scientists and technical personnel. Do they know about the supernatural? To a limited extent, the colonel nodded. They know about the existence of anomalies, but not about the ancients or the approaching convergence. For them, these are just scientific studies. "How will we get to the station?" another operative asked. "By train to Murmansk, then a military flight to Novaya Zemlya. From there by helicopter to the station itself, if weather permits. If not, by snowmobiles." "Weapons? Equipment?" "Standard kit." Derzhavin pointed to a table where holsters with pistols and Val submachine guns lay. "Silver bullets, runic cold weapons, plus special devices from the technical department. Anomaly detectors, stabilizers, protective amulets." He gave each person a small package. "These amulets can protect your mind from the influence of the ancients. Not for long, but it should be enough for emergency evacuation if needed." Streltsov took his package. Inside was a small silver pendant with an engraved symbol resembling an eye enclosed in a triangle. "This is—" "Yes," Derzhavin interrupted him. "One of the most ancient protective symbols, the all-seeing eye. Wear it next to your medallion. It will strengthen the connection with your supernatural companion and simultaneously protect you from external influences." Igor put on the pendant next to Marak's medallion. He felt a slight tremor run through his body, like static electricity. The medallion warmed slightly, for the first time in a long while. "Assembly today at 18 at Leningradsky Station." Derzhavin concluded the briefing. "The train departs at 18:30. Good luck, and come back alive, at least most of you." The last phrase hung in the air like a heavy burden. The colonel had just made it clear that he was ready to sacrifice some of them to complete the mission. As everyone began to disperse, Derzhavin called out to Streltsov, "Lieutenant, stay a moment." Vera cast a concerned glance at Igor, but left with the others. When the door closed, the colonel gestured for Streltsov to sit down. "I need to tell you something," he began, taking an old worn folder from the safe, "about your grandfather, and about why I'm sending you specifically to North 16. He opened the folder and took out a yellowed photograph. It showed a young officer in an NKVD uniform standing against a background of snow-covered buildings. Streltsov easily recognized his grandfather, the same facial features, the same direct gaze. And around his neck, a familiar medallion. "Vasily Petrovich was one of the department's best operatives," said Derzhavin. "Brave, intelligent, dedicated to the cause. His supernatural companion, Shadow, was one of the strongest entities we had ever managed to establish a connection with." "Shadow?" Igor repeated. "Sounds like Marak." "Not just sounds like," the colonel looked at him intently. Shadow and Merak are manifestations of the same entity, different aspects, if you will. Streltsov felt everything go cold inside. The medallion on his chest vibrated slightly. Are you saying my supernatural companion is the same one my grandfather had? Not exactly, Derzhavin shook his head. Rather, a descendant, a fragment, a part of the original entity that was once bound to your grandfather. And you knew this when you recruited me? Yes, the colonel didn't deny it. We've been monitoring your family for many years, waiting for Vasily Petrovich's legacy to manifest. When you encountered that creature in Grozny and survived, we knew the time had come. You've been using me, Streltsov clenched his fists, all this time. We're all instruments in a greater game, Lieutenant, Derzhavin responded harshly. You, even our supernatural companions. What matters is the outcome, saving the world from invasion. Everything else is trivial. He took another document from the folder, a strange text in an unknown language with a handwritten translation. Your grandfather found a way to counter the ancients, said the colonel. In 1938 at North 16, he performed a ritual that was supposed to close the portal forever, and he almost succeeded, but something went wrong. Instead of complete closure, the portal was merely sealed, temporarily, and now the seal is weakening. And my grandfather, what happened to him? Officially, missing in action, Derzhavin sighed. Unofficially, we believe he ended up on the other side, in the dimension of the ancients, and possibly he's still there. What? Streltsov couldn't believe his ears. That's impossible. It's been almost 50 years. Time flows differently in the dimensions of the ancients. The colonel looked at him seriously. For them, months could be seconds and years, minutes, or vice versa. We don't know for certain. And you're sending me there because you carry his blood, Derzhavin pointed at Streltsov's medallion. And you're connected to an aspect of the same supernatural entity. If anyone can complete what your grandfather started. Igor was silent, trying to process what he'd heard. His entire existence, his entire career, even his placement in Department 13, it was all part of a plan. He hadn't been chosen randomly, not for his skills or courage, but for the blood flowing in his veins. What exactly am I supposed to do? He finally asked. At the station? Find your grandfather's records, Derzhavin replied. He kept a research journal, and find the artifact he used in the ritual. The Eye of the Abyss, that's what he called it. With it, you can close the breach without the traditional sacrifice. Without giving up an entire soul? Yes, the colonel nodded. At least that's what your grandfather believed. But as I said, something went wrong. Perhaps the artifact was damaged, or the ritual was performed incorrectly. We need to find out. Derzhavin closed the folder and handed it to Streltsov. Take it. This is everything we have about your grandfather's mission. Study it carefully before departure, and be cautious. If the ancients sense your connection to Vasily Petrovich, they might show a special interest. What do you mean by special interest? Those who have managed to oppose them become valuable to them. They don't simply destroy such people. They transform them, use their knowledge, their power for their own purposes. Streltsov remembered his dream, the creature that came from under the ice, and its words, "You are one of us, always have been." Does Vera know? He asked. About my grandfather, about the true purpose of the mission? No, Derzhavin shook his head. And she shouldn't know, at least not yet. For her and the others, this is a standard reconnaissance operation with possible application of the self-sacrifice protocol. You are the only one who knows the truth. Why such secrecy? Because the Eye of the Abyss is not just an artifact, the colonel lowered his voice. It's a weapon. Dangerous, unpredictable. If it falls into the wrong hands, the consequences could be worse than an invasion by the ancients. He handed Streltsov another item, a small metal key of a strange shape. If you find the artifact, you'll need this to activate it. Keep the key with you. Don't trust anyone, even your own people. And after activation, what will happen to me? Derzhavin hesitated for a moment, then answered, I don't know. Nobody knows. Your grandfather was the only one who tried to use the eye, and he didn't return to tell about it. He stood up, indicating that the conversation was over. Good luck, Lieutenant, to all of us. Streltsov left the office with the folder under his arm and the key in his pocket. Thoughts and questions without answers swarmed in his head. He was a pawn in a game he barely understood, and now he was being sent on a mission from which his grandfather had never returned. Vera was waiting for him in the corridor. Everything all right? She asked, noticing his grim expression. What did Derzhavin want? Just additional instructions, Streltsov lied, hiding the folder in his bag. Nothing special. She looked at him doubtfully, but didn't press the issue. See you at the station, said Vera, squeezing his hand. Be careful, Igor. I have a bad feeling about this mission. So do I, he answered honestly. In his apartment, Streltsov carefully studied the contents of the folder. His grandfather's journal consisted of scattered notes, often in languages Igor didn't know, Latin, ancient Greek, and some completely unknown dialects. But even from what he could read, a disturbing picture emerged. March 15, 1938. The ice has begun to melt. Not the right time of year for this. Something is heating it from below. The expedition discovered a strange glow beneath the surface of the Kara Sea. We leave tomorrow. March 20th, 1938. We found it, deep within the glacier. A metallic object resembling a sphere, but distorted, as if something was trying to break out from inside. On the surface are symbols that I cannot read, but somehow I understand their meaning. Shadow is troubled, says it's a portal, worse, a key to a portal. March 24th, 1938. The sphere has begun to pulsate, emitting a greenish glow. 3 scientists who were studying it disappeared, simply dissolved into the air. But I hear their voices. They're calling me, saying they found a path, that there, beyond the boundary, is knowledge, power. But Shadow warns it's a trap. The ancients use people's desires against them. April 10th, 1938. Shadow told me about the Eye of the Abyss, an artifact capable of closing any portal. But to do this, one must venture into the very lair of the ancients, obtain it and return. No one has ever returned, but I must try, otherwise they will come here, and that will be the end. April 17, 1938, found a way to create the eye here in our world. It will require a sacrifice, but not the usual kind, not an entire soul, but something else, a particle of limbo enclosed in human blood. My blood will suffice. The ritual begins tomorrow. April 18th, 1938. Something is going wrong. The breach is growing instead of closing. They came from under the ice. Too many of them. Shadow is trying to hold them back, but it's beyond her strength. I see their true forms. It's madness. Pure madness. If someone finds these notes, the last chance is in my blood, in my offspring. The artifact waits at the bottom, where sky meets earth. The notes ended there. The last pages were stained with something dark, resembling dried blood. Streltsov closed the journal and leaned back in his chair. His grandfather had tried to create an artifact capable of closing the portal without the traditional sacrifice, but had failed. And now Derzhavin was sending him to complete what Vasily Petrovich had started. But the last phrase troubled him most. The last chance is in my blood, in my offspring. What did that mean? That Igor was supposed to do what his grandfather couldn't? Or that he himself was part of some plan laid out back in 1938? He automatically touched his medallion. It responded with a faint warmth. Mrak, Streltsov called quietly. Did you know about this? About Shadow? About the fact that you are connected? Yes, master. The voice in his head was quieter than usual, but more distinct than in recent days. Shadow was my ancestor, part of me, as you are part of the Streltsov lineage. And you knew about my grandfather? About what he tried to do? vaguely, like echoes of memory, like dreaming someone else's life. And the eye of the abyss, what is it? A weapon, forbidden, dangerous. Mrak was clearly struggling to find words. Can close gates, can open them wider. Double-edged blade cuts both sides. How do I use it? Don't know. But blood. Your blood is the key, as was your grandfather's blood. What will happen to me if I activate the eye? Silence. Then quietly, almost in a whisper, change, transformation. Not death, but not life either. Mrak, you need to tell me everything you know, completely, no riddles. I cannot, Master. There was a strange emotion in the voice of the supernatural being, something like regret. There are things that even I cannot see. No, it's beyond even my understanding. What about the ancients? What are they? They were before everything, before light and darkness, before life and death, before time itself. They are that from which everything was created, and that which can destroy everything. And they're returning? Now? Yes, through the convergence, when worlds come close enough for them to seep through. And my grandfather? Is he alive? A long silence. Then, I don't know, but if he entered their dimension, he may be something else now, neither alive nor dead, transformed. Streltsov closed his eyes, trying to process all this. His grandfather possibly still existed somewhere beyond the boundaries of reality, transformed by the ancients. And now Igor was to go to the same place, risking the same fate. He began packing for the trip. Winter clothes, additional gear, weapons. He placed the folder with his grandfather's journal at the very bottom of his backpack, covering it with other items. The key given by Derzhavin he hung around his neck next to his medallion and protective amulet. Before leaving, Streltsov paused at the mirror in the hallway. In the reflection, he saw himself, tired, with bags under his eyes and an unhealthy pallor. But he also noticed the resemblance to his grandfather's photograph from the folder, the same facial features, the same stubborn gaze. The last chance is in my blood, in my offspring. The words from the journal echoed in his mind. Whatever it meant, he was going to find out the truth, at Station North 16, in the place where his grandfather disappeared, in the place where sky meets earth. Leningradsky Station was noisy and crowded. The usual evening hustle, passengers hurrying to their trains, those seeing them off waving hands, porters rolling carts with luggage. Streltsov had arrived early and now stood by the schedule board, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. The first to appear was a tall, middle-aged man with a military bearing, carrying a sports bag, Major Klimov from the analytical department. A good strategist, but rumored to have a problematic companion, a water demon demanding constant high payments. Then two more operatives approached. A young woman with short red hair, Lieutenant Solovyeva, and elderly Captain Grigoriev, a department veteran who had lived with his medallion longer than any other active operative. Vera was not yet visible, and Streltsov began to worry. Less than half an hour remained before departure. "Nervous?" asked Klimov, approaching and lighting a cigarette. "First mission to the far north." "Not the first," replied Streltsov. "Afghanistan could be colder." "Afghanistan didn't have what's waiting for us at North 16, the major exhaled smoke. "They say that station is cursed, since the 40s, since an entire expedition disappeared there." "My grandfather's expedition," Igor clarified grimly. "Ah, so that's it." Klimov looked at him with interest. "Then it's clear why Derzhavin insisted on your participation. Family business, so to speak." Streltsov didn't respond. He noticed Vera hurrying toward them through the crowd. She was dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, a sweater, a coat, but her military training was evident in the way she moved. "Sorry I'm late," she said, approaching. "There was an urgent matter." "What matter?" asked Igor, noticing her tense gaze. "Not here," she answered quietly. "On the train." They proceeded to the platform where their train was already waiting, a standard long-distance passenger train. They had been allocated a separate compartment in the last car. After settling in the compartment, The operatives remained silent for some time, each absorbed in their own thoughts. The train started moving, and city landscapes flowed past the window, gradually giving way to suburbs, then forests and fields blanketed in snow. So, Captain Grigoriev was the first to break the silence. What are our chances of returning alive? 50-50, Klimov answered honestly. If the intelligence is correct, something very serious is happening at the station. We may have to apply the special protocol. Self-sacrifice, Solovyeva said quietly. Someone will have to stay behind. Only as a last resort, Streltsov reminded them. First, we need to assess the situation, find survivors if there are any, and understand the scale of the threat. Do you believe anyone survived? Asked Grigoriev, looking at him skeptically. After that message, they came from under the ice? Hope dies last, Igor shrugged. No, the old captain shook his head. Those who hope too long die last. Silence fell again in the compartment. Outside it was rapidly growing dark. Winter days are short, and they were heading north, where the sun shows itself for only a few hours this time of year. I need to talk to you, Vera whispered, leaning towards Streltsov. In private. They went out into the corridor and walked to the vestibule, which was empty and relatively quiet. Vera took a small metal object from her pocket, a bug detector, and activated it. After making sure there were no listening devices nearby, she turned to Igor. I found something in the archive, she said quietly, about your grandfather, and about North 16. What exactly? Streltsov tensed. What Derzhavin is hiding from us. Vera looked around and continued even more quietly. The Eye of the Abyss, an artifact capable of closing a portal without the traditional sacrifice. Igor tried to maintain an impassive expression, though everything inside him tightened. She knew. Somehow she had learned what was supposed to remain secret. Did Derzhavin tell you? She asked, carefully observing his reaction. Yes, Streltsov didn't deny it. After a pause, he added, today, before departure, he said I need to find the eye and activate it, complete what my grandfather started. And you agreed? Disbelief sounded in her voice. Did I have a choice? He shrugged. The alternative is the self-sacrifice ritual. One of us would have to give up an entire soul, die. If there's another way. There is no other way, Vera grabbed his arm. It's a trap, Igor. The Eye of the Abyss isn't salvation. It's a weapon of the ancients. They created it to deceive ones like us. It doesn't close portals, it opens them wider. How do you know? Streltsov frowned. From the secret archives. She took a folded sheet of paper from her inner pocket. This is a copy of the report from an expedition sent to North 16 in 1953, 15 years after your grandfather's disappearance. They found his journal and the artifact he tried to create. She unfolded the paper. It contained printed text marked Top Secret. Destroy after reading. The expedition discovered an artifact matching the description of the Eye of the Abyss in Streltsov VP's journal. In appearance, a metallic sphere approximately 30 centimeters in diameter with numerous symbols on the surface. Analysis of the symbols showed their similarity to writing found on other artifacts of supernatural origin. During attempts to study the artifact, an incident occurred. 3 scientific staff members who directly contacted the eye were subjected to an unknown influence. Symptoms included change in eye color, appearance of a greenish glow, speech disturbance, pronunciation of sounds and words in an unknown language, behavioral changes, extreme aggression directed at other expedition members. The affected individuals were isolated, but within 48 hours their condition worsened. Physical changes were observed: elongation of limbs, skull deformation, appearance of additional eyeballs on various parts of the body. On the 3rd day, all 3 died while attempting to escape from isolation. The artifact was sealed and left at the station in a special storage facility. Further research was deemed inadvisable due to high risk. Conclusion: The Eye of the Abyss is a potential weapon of the ancients, aimed at transforming humans into conduits for invasion, not recommended for use under any circumstances. This could be disinformation, said Streltsov after reading the report. Derzhavin is sure the artifact can help, that my grandfather was close to success. Your grandfather disappeared, Igor. Vera squeezed his hand tighter, along with his entire expedition, and those who tried to use the eye after him turned into monsters. That's not a coincidence. What if they just didn't know how to use it properly? Igor took out the key Derzhavin had given him from under his sweater. The colonel gave me this, said it can activate the artifact. Vera took the key, examining it carefully. Strange shape, she remarked. And these symbols, similar to those on the metal object in Karelia. What? Look, she pointed to the intricate patterns engraved on the key's surface. The same curved lines, the same intersections. It's their writing, Igor, the writing of the ancients. Streltsov felt goosebumps running down his spine. If the key was created by them. Derzhavin is playing a double game, Vera said quietly. He knows about the danger of the eye, but he's sending you after it anyway. Why? What does he really want? I don't know, Igor answered honestly, but I intend to find out. We'll find out, Vera corrected him. Together. She unexpectedly embraced him, holding him tightly. Whatever happens there in the Arctic, she whispered, remember that you're not alone. I'm with you, to the end. Streltsov hugged her back, feeling the warmth of her body, the beating of her heart. And at that moment, he realized that Vera had become something more to him than just a partner, someone worth returning alive for, someone worth saving the world for. The medallion on his chest warmed slightly, as if Mrak had responded to this thought. Perhaps even supernatural beings could understand what it means to care for another. And that gave hope. The train moved northward, taking them farther from Moscow, from the familiar world. Outside the window drifted snow-covered forests, small stations, scattered villages with lights in their windows. Peaceful winter Russia, unaware that somewhere at the edge of the earth, gates to other dimensions were opening, from which came beings capable of destroying all humanity. Returning to the compartment, Streltsov and Vera found the other operatives engaged in quiet conversation. Klimov was laying out maps of the Novaya Zemlya archipelago on the small table. Grigoriev was studying some documents, and Solovyeva was checking special equipment. We're planning the route from the landing point to the station, the major explained when they entered. According to the latest data, the weather there isn't good. Blizzard, low temperature. We might have to go by snowmobiles for the last 20 kilometers. How long will it take? Asked Streltsov. In the best case, a day, Klimov replied. In the worst, there could be delays. In any case, we must manage to reach the station and assess the situation within 3 days of arriving in Murmansk. Why exactly 3 days? Derzhavin set a deadline, the major explained. If after 3 days we don't make contact, a support group will be sent, with orders to destroy the station along with the potential threat. By what means? Igor frowned. A low-yield tactical nuclear device, Klimov answered dryly. Officially, simulating an accident at a research reactor. Unofficially, clearing the territory of supernatural activity. A heavy silence fell in the compartment. Everyone understood that the colonel wasn't joking. If they failed their mission or simply didn't report back in time, they would face death from their own side. Delightful, Solovyeva finally said. So we have a choice. Either die voluntarily in a self-sacrifice ritual, or from a nuclear explosion. Don't forget the option with the ancients, Grigoriev grimly added. Transformation into something inhuman, like those scientists from the 53 report. Streltsov and Vera exchanged quick glances. How did the captain know about the incident described in the secret report? What report? Igor asked cautiously. I'm old, but not blind, Lieutenant, Grigoriev smirked. I've worked in the department for 30 years. I know practically all the secrets of North 16, including the story of the Eye of the Abyss." "And Derzhavin knows you're aware of this?" asked Vera. "Of course. That's why he sent me with you. I'm the only one who saw those beings. In 53, I was there with the cleanup team after the incident." The old captain took a flask from his inner pocket, took a swig, and offered it to the others. Everyone except Solovyeva declined. "They were no longer human," Grigoriev continued after a pause, "but not something completely alien either, like a transitional form, a human shell filled with something else, something that was trying to adapt the body to new conditions." "You eliminated them?" Solovyeva asked quietly. "Had to." The captain stared into nothing, remembering events from 40 years ago. "They killed half the station personnel before we managed to corner them, and even then, ordinary bullets barely affected them. We had to use special means." "And the artifact?" asked Streltsov. "The Eye of the Abyss?" "They sealed it. Special container, runic seals, protective bunker deep under the station. Access only with special permission from the department director." "Derzhavin?" "No." Grigoriev shook his head. "The director then was Kornev. The old man died in 78. Heart attack. Although rumor has it, not such an attack after all. He was against using the eye under any circumstances." "And Derzhavin is in favor," Vera said thoughtfully. "Not just in favor," the captain lowered his voice. "Obsessed with the idea. Thinks the artifact can not only close portals, but completely destroy the ancients, once and for all." "Is that possible?" asked Klimov, who had been listening silently until then. "I don't know," Grigoriev answered honestly, "but I saw what happened to those who simply touched the artifact. Not activated it, not used it, just touched it. And it was horrific." Silence fell again in the compartment. Outside the window flew dark winter landscapes, illuminated only by the rare lights of stations and the full moon hanging in the black sky. Streltsov looked at his hands, thinking about what Grigoriev had told them. If merely touching the Eye of the Abyss could turn people into monsters, what would happen to someone who tried to activate it? To him, change, transformation. Not death, but not quite life, he remembered Murak's words. "I think we all need to rest," said Vera, noticing his state. "Tomorrow will be a difficult day." The others agreed. The women took the upper bunks, the men, the lower ones. Soon the compartment was plunged into semi-darkness, illuminated only by a dim nightlight. One by one, the operatives fell asleep, exhausted by the tense day and heavy thoughts. Only Streltsov couldn't sleep. He looked out the window at the dark silhouettes of trees rushing past, and thought about his grandfather, about his attempt to use the mysterious artifact, about what might have happened to him on the other side of the portal. Was he still alive? And if so, had he remained human? Suddenly he felt Vera carefully touch his hand. She had noiselessly descended from her bunk and was now sitting beside him. "Can't sleep either?" Igor asked quietly. "Nightmares," she answered simply. "Always the same, Karelia, the green glow, voices in my head." "I know," he squeezed her hand. "Same here." They sat in silence looking out the window. The train sped through the night, carrying them further north toward the unknown. "Whatever happens there at the station," Vera finally said, "whatever Derzhavin says, don't try to use the eye alone. Promise me." "I promise," Streltsov replied, and at that moment he was truly sincere. "We'll act together." "Together," she smiled weakly. "You know, when all this is over, we could—" She didn't finish. Suddenly the entire car shuddered. There was a screech of metal, screams from passengers. The train braked sharply, and Vera was thrown onto the opposite seat. "What's happening?" exclaimed Klimov, now awake. Streltsov rushed to the window. Outside was impenetrable darkness, but he noticed a strange glow in the distance, greenish reflections on the snow, similar to those they had seen in Karelia. "Damn," he whispered. "It can't be. Not here." In the corridor came shouts, the sound of running feet. Someone was pulling at the handle of their compartment, but the door was locked. "Weapons!" Klimov commanded, drawing his pistol. Everyone immediately followed his example, pulling weapons from holsters. Streltsov took the safety off his PM, loaded with silver bullets. "Medallions," he said, taking out his own. "We may need to summon help." The others nodded, understanding that he meant their supernatural companions. All except Grigoriev. "I wouldn't advise it," the old captain shook his head. "If this is what I think it is, your companions will be useless, or even dangerous." "What do you mean?" Vera frowned. "If there are ancients outside or their emissaries, your medallions aren't protection but targets. They'll sense the supernatural beings and attack immediately." The knocking at the door grew louder, more insistent. Someone or something was trying to break into the compartment. "What should we do?" asked Solovyeva, aiming her pistol at the door. "Protective amulets," Streltsov said quickly, taking out the one Derzhavin had given him. "The all-seeing eye. Everyone put them on." They quickly donned the amulets. The knocking at the door ceased as suddenly as it had begun. There was silence, ominous, unnatural, as if the entire train had suddenly been plunged into a vacuum. "What?" Klimov began, but Vera gestured for him to be quiet. They waited. Seconds stretched into minutes, into eternity. Nothing happened. Only the strange silence and the greenish glow outside the window, slowly fading. "I'll check the corridor," Streltsov finally said, heading for the door. "I'm with you." Vera stood beside him, ready to cover him. Igor slowly opened the door, pistol at the ready. The corridor was empty and dark. The lights weren't working, only emergency lamps provided dim reddish illumination. And silence. Complete, absolute silence. "Let's check the other compartments," Vera suggested. "Solovyeva, come with us. Klimov, Grigoriev, stay here. Keep the defense." They moved slowly along the corridor, looking into each compartment. They were all empty. No passengers, no train attendants, no one. "This is impossible," Solovyeva whispered. The train was full of people. "Like in Karelia," Streltsov said quietly, "the platoon that simply disappeared." They reached the end of the car and opened the door to the vestibule. Behind it was not the usual platform between cars, but emptiness. Absolute blackness in which neither the next car, nor the ground, nor the sky was visible, as if the entire world beyond their car had simply ceased to exist. "What the hell?" Solovyeva breathed. "Back," Streltsov commanded. "Quickly." They hurried back to their compartment. Suddenly behind them came a strange sound, as if sharp blades were cutting through the air. Turning around, Igor saw thin tentacles of greenish light emerging from the void, writhing, probing the space around them. They moved quickly, purposefully, as if searching for something. "Run!" he shouted, pushing the women forward. They rushed toward the compartment. The light tentacles followed them, accelerating. One of them touched Solovyeva's hand, and she cried out in pain. A burn immediately formed on her skin, emitting a faint greenish glow. Bursting into the compartment, they slammed the door. Klimov and Grigoriev met them with weapons ready. "What's happening?" the major demanded. "The ancients," Vera gasped. "Or their emissaries. They're here, and they've taken everyone from the train." "Solovyeva is injured," Streltsov pointed to the girl's burned hand. Grigoriev quickly took a first aid kit from his bag, extracted some ointment, and began treating the wound. "This will neutralize their influence," he explained. "Temporarily." "What do we do?" asked Vera. "We can't stay here, and we can't leave." "There is one way," Klimov said slowly, "but it's dangerous." "Tell us," Streltsov nodded. "Summon our companions all at once. Combine their powers, create a protective barrier, and break through the emptiness in the vestibule." "But Grigoriev said it's dangerous," Solovyeva reminded them, wincing from the pain in her hand. "That they'll sense it and attack." "Yes," the major agreed, "but we have protective amulets, and if we all do it simultaneously, the element of surprise will be on our side." "And the payment?" asked Streltsov. "We all know our companions don't help for free." "We'll have to pay," Klimov answered firmly. "The alternative is worse." They understood that the Major was right. Staying in the trap would be suicide. Sooner or later, the creatures would break through. "All right," Streltsov agreed. "On the count of 3. 1, 2. At that moment, the compartment window suddenly shattered. Glass shards flew everywhere but didn't fall to the floor. They hung in the air as if in zero gravity. An icy wind rushed into the compartment, and with it, a greenish glow that began to form into a humanoid figure. 3! Igor shouted, tearing the medallion from his neck. Everyone followed his example. 5 medallions glowed simultaneously, and from them emerged supernatural beings. Streltsov's Marak, Vera's Zarya, Klimov's water demon, Solovyeva's fire elemental, and the ancient spirit of war, Grigoriev's companion. The cramped compartment was now incredibly crowded, 5 humans and 5 supernatural entities against one emissary of the ancients, which continued to form from the greenish light. "Attack!" Vera commanded. The 5 entities rushed at the glowing figure, Mrak and Zarya in the vanguard, the others slightly behind. A strange battle began, not physical but rather energetic. Bright flashes of light, waves of darkness, streams of water and fire, all directed at the greenish figure. The emissary fought back. Long luminous tentacles whipped in all directions, trying to reach not the supernatural beings, but the humans. Understanding that the real targets were themselves, the operatives formed a circle, covering each other. "We need to break through," Klimov shouted above the roar of battle. "To the vestibule." They moved toward the door, squeezing with difficulty past the battling entities. 5 people, back to back, slowly retreated down the corridor, and behind them followed the incredible battle of light and darkness, fire and water, life and death. Reaching the vestibule, they saw that the door to the void was still open. The blackness beyond seemed impenetrable, absolute. "What now?" Solovyeva cried. "We can't jump in there." "We can," Grigoriev responded firmly. "With our companions. They'll create a bridge." He was the first to summon his spirit of war, a massive figure in ancient armor. The being stood at the edge of the void and extended its hand, creating something like an energy bridge, a thin silvery thread leading into the darkness. "Let's go one by one," the old captain commanded. "Solovyeva first, then Klimov, Vera, Streltsov. I'll be last." "But," the young woman began. "No buts," Grigoriev cut her off. "I'm the senior officer. Execute." Solovyeva called her elemental, which added a stream of fire to the silvery bridge, strengthening it. Then, taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the glowing path and disappeared into the darkness. Klimov followed her example, adding a stream of water from his demon to the bridge. Then it was Vera's turn. "Igor," she turned before stepping into the void. "We'll meet on the other side. Promise me." "I promise," Streltsov nodded. Zarya added her light to the bridge, and Vera stepped into the darkness. Now it was Igor's turn. He summoned Mrak, who reluctantly tore himself away from the battle with the emissary. "This is dangerous, master," the voice sounded in his head. "I don't know where this path leads." "To where the others are," Streltsov replied. "Help me, Mrak. I will pay." "What price?" The supernatural being looked strangely agitated, almost frightened. "Whatever you demand," Igor said resolutely. "But help me now." Mrak hesitated, then his dark substance spread across the silvery bridge, reinforcing it. "Go, master, but know, beyond this darkness waits a greater darkness, and the price will be high." Streltsov nodded and, without looking back, stepped forward into the void. The sensation was strange, as if he was falling through a mass of ice water, unable to breathe, move, or think. Only an eternal descent into darkness, and then it suddenly ended. Igor fell onto something hard and cold. Opening his eyes, he saw the night sky above him, strewn with stars. The Arctic sky bright and clear. Beside him lay the others, Vera, Klimov, Solovyeva, all unconscious but alive. Grigoriev was missing. Streltsov struggled to his feet. Around them stretched an endless snowy plain, and a few 100 meters away stood buildings. Dark, lifeless silhouettes against the background of ice and snow. Polar Station North 16. They had somehow been transported directly to their destination, bypassing hundreds of kilometers of travel. But at what cost? And where was Grigoriev? Streltsov reached for the medallion on his neck but couldn't find it. Marak had disappeared, perhaps having spent all his energy creating the bridge through the void, or having taken too high a payment. Igor felt a strange emptiness inside, not physical, but spiritual, as if something important had been torn from his soul, something he hadn't even been aware of until that moment. Vera, he knelt beside her, trying to bring her to consciousness. Vera, wake up! She slowly opened her eyes. Where are we? She whispered. At our destination, Streltsov answered, helping her sit up. North 16. Somehow we've been transported right here. And the others? Klimov and Solovyeva are here, unconscious. Grigoriev is gone. Vera looked around, trying to make sense of the situation. Our medallions... She automatically touched her neck. They're gone. Yes, Igor nodded. It seems their power was completely used up creating the bridge. Or it was the payment, Vera finished for him. Not a part of the soul, but the connection to the supernatural itself. She tried to stand but wavered and sat back down on the snow. I'm too weak, she murmured. Something has drained my strength. Streltsov felt the same, a strange fatigue, a weakness that wasn't physical, as if something were feeding on their life energy. We need to reach the station, he said, pointing to the dark silhouettes of buildings. Find shelter, get warm, otherwise we'll simply freeze here. He helped Vera stand, then together they revived Klimov and Solovyeva. All four were in the same condition, weakened, disoriented, without medallions, but alive. And Grigoriev? Klimov asked when he could speak. Where is he? I don't know, Streltsov answered honestly. He might have stayed on the train, or paid another price for our salvation. They silently honored the memory of the old captain, understanding that they would likely never see him again. What now? Asked Solovyeva, shivering from cold and fear. We go to the station, Igor said decisively. Complete the mission. It's all we can do now. And the four remaining operatives, having lost their supernatural companions, slowly moved across the snowy wasteland toward the dark silhouettes of Station North 16, to the place where Streltsov's grandfather had disappeared, to the place where possibly the Eye of the Abyss was waiting, an artifact capable of either saving the world or destroying it completely, to the place where each of them would have to make a choice between duty and survival, between humanity and their own soul. And above them, in the clear Arctic sky, stars formed strange patterns similar to the symbols they had seen on the metal object in Karelia. The symbols of the ancients, harbingers of the convergence of spheres.